Welcome into the Cover One Live edition. I'm here kind of on behalf of Cover One to break down my initial thoughts on an interesting trade that just went down, probably we'll call it 30 minutes ago here with Cardale Jones. So I said probably last May that I was convinced Cardale Jones would be a prime target to be traded. I didn't actually think that it would get done so quickly. I thought he would need to at least show some training camp skills. I thought he'd have to go in and have a really big game one or game two to be able to get any return. Right now it was said to be a 7th-round pick from Adam Schefter. So we downgraded a late 4th-round pick, a couple picks later than Dak Prescott, in order to trade for a 7th this year. So it is a loss in asset. There's something to be said that if Cardale Jones would have played maybe a couple of games in preseason as just a trade flyer, that I think we could have at least gotten a 5th or a 6th-round pick for him. It is conditional, so that has to mean that, based on how many games he plays, he will be... I would assume he has to make the team for that condition to go up and probably dress. I would doubt it's just a make the team. The Chargers' depth chart is pitiful. They have Kellen Clemens actually as their second-string quarterback behind Phillip Rivers. So I don't think Cardale will have a hard time making the roster, even as a third quarterback, if he can't beat out Kellen Clemens. The Chargers have a lot to gain from this move, a 7th-round pick. Their quarterback depth chart's once again weak behind Phillip Rivers. Anthony Lynn loved him. He probably would have played in more if he was head coach longer here. I think that they made out, actually. I think the Bills needed to make the trade. Nathan Peterman is their quarterback of the future, at least backup quarterback of the future, if that's a real thing. But Cardale Jones gets to go probably in more spotlight, gets to play behind a more established quarterback that he can, learn a few things from, who has a rocket arm as well. So I think, believe it or not, Phillip Rivers is probably more suited to teach Cardale Jones than Tyrod Taylor would be, or TJ Yates here. So I do believe it's a good trade for the Chargers. I really wish the Bills would have hung on to him. I'm not a big Cardale Jones fan for the Bills roster. He was drafted by Doug Whaley, an old regime. There was limited chance of him making the team, but there was one thing we could have done would be to have him audition for that once again. I really think that by playing against weaker competition, second and third stringers, Cardale Jones would have been able to fetch a higher compensation than a 7th or a mid-7th round pick that we're going to get from him. I mean, that's marginal. The condition can't make it more than a 6th round pick. There's no way. And I'm sure it's unrealistic conditions. I'm sure it's 8+ games dressed, probably maybe even a certain amount of snaps in order to raise that 7th round draft choice. So I don't believe that condition's real. So we're going to assume that it's going to just be a straight up 7th round pick next year. So let's say Cardale Jones plays in call it 2 preseason games, 3 even. I don't think he would play much the 3rd preseason game, so let's say 2 preseason games, and then you maybe give him the whole 4th game or half the 4th game, because that's usually your Matt Leinart or one of those things. And nothing if he got cut. I mean, it's still we still control that destiny. Like, he doesn't just decide he wants to be cut, so it would be us saying, he's not going to make the roster. So that would be, that would be pressing your luck all the way through the 4th preseason game. If he degresses, he doesn't show any promise. You're risking a 7th round pick, sure, to cut him. But I do think that by showing up, playing well, you could have fetched that 5th and 6th round pick. Look, Matt Castle did. So I think that he could have only really raised his trade value. I think Anthony Lynn would have been after. They could have even been more desperate after Kellen Clemens played a couple of games as their backup quarterback. So I do think that I don't know that there's much that could have happened that Anthony Lynn would have said after the 3rd preseason game, like, look, I don't really want him anymore. So playing time over whose development? Do you mean for the Bills or the Chargers? So I'm not sure, but I'm talking about on the Chargers end. If you played Kellen Clemens, who you don't need to develop, I don't really see any need to play him. He is what he is. He was on the Jets like 30 years ago, so there's really nothing there to develop. He's just your run-of-the-mill, probably worse than TJ Yates. He's your run-of-the-mill backup quarterback. So by Cardale Jones playing here, I really think that we could have increased his trade value. I don't think you're going to decrease it. So lots of people commenting in on this topic right now. Really wish we had drafted Dak Prescott from the Bills expert. Your opinion's loud and clear, Bills expert. First of all, we didn't have a pick that would have taken him, so that pick was moved for Ragland a couple of rounds earlier. So I don't know how we would have picked him. He was picked before Cardale Jones, so it's unfortunate. And we talked about this in a Cover One podcast a couple of weeks ago with an unbiased source from the Texans. Cole Thompson basically said, "Look, I don't think that Dak Prescott would have done anything on the Bills," and I agree. I don't even know that he would have played. So, and yeah, okay, yeah, I agree. Our GM definitely wants to develop like our own talent. So, yeah, I mean, Nathan Peterman to me was the right fit. He's more accurate. He looked good in OTAs. He needs as many reps as he can throughout the different practices that we're going to have. And look, there's 3 quarterbacks on the roster now. Tyrod Taylor's going to get his snaps. He's going to get his throughout camp. He's going to get his starting reps. But from there's a lot of reps to go around. There's a lot of backup receivers. There's a lot of backup running backs. There's a lot of things that need to be done on an implementation end, and Nathan Peterman's going to step right in and get a ton of snaps. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Bean has to say tomorrow about this move, and kind of how he rationalizes maybe making that trade today rather than, like I said, maybe in a few weeks when maybe you could have ramped up Cardale Jones' trade value. So at Cover One, we're actually going to be there at training camp. We're going to be right in front of all the coaches and all the executive front office. So we'll be bringing you fresh content throughout the week and all of training camp. So we will definitely be breaking down like everything that we see. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, Peterman's going to be the number 2 quarterback. I think initially T.J. Yates will get a lion's share of those number 2 quarterback reps. That's to be for sure. But I do think by call it 2 or 3 weeks in here, I do think Nathan Peterman, by call it the 4th preseason game, could very well be your backup quarterback, definitely going into the first game. I do think he'd be your guy dressed. I think that you'll have T.J. Yates in the quarterback room. I think that in emergency situations, like week-to-week basis, you could put up instead of Nathan Peterman. But I do think that he's going to be your second quarterback and should play in case of Tyrod injury. Rob, I mean, I agree with you that Kevin Elliott definitely should be signed over Anquan Bolden. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that Dream Catching or Catching My Dreams, or whatever he goes by, should definitely be the number 3 receiver for the Bills. And that leads me to there is a roster spot open. Those are precious this time of year in August. As August comes around and end of July, you can't say enough about what a roster spot means. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can go with that. We did just sign a couple of guys. The most notably Bakari Rambo. I still think safety has a lot of work to do. Marcus Gilchrist just got cleared. I think that's a great backup safety you can have on your roster who could start. So I definitely think there's room to be there's that roster spot's big, and that's one of the biggest things I think we wanted to get away from this was, hey, clearing up a roster spot, they're going to be doing something with that. So you're getting that 7th round pick and you're clearing a roster spot, and to me, I think that has to go. I think that will go to a safety, but could it be a developmental quarterback that they need to take snaps? I hope not. I hope that we don't waste a single rep on a guy that is nothing more than a camp arm. I hope there is no need to waste a roster spot on a 4th quarterback, especially when you pretty much have your 3 set. I would give your T.J. Yates and Nathan Peterman like all the work, beside your starting reps. So I don't want a 4th quarterback coming in. I think it's a waste. If they were going to do that and use a 4th quarterback, I do think they should have kept Cardale Jones and still auditioned to increase his trade value as it happens this time of year. I mean, it's an asset. You're growing an asset. So as a mid-7th round pick is what you're going to get back. I think that they should have hung on and played him still. So that's still running through my mind. I'd like anyone's who's tuning in like their thoughts on if they agree with that, if they think that just taking that mid-7th round pick now is the way to go, or if waiting it out and potentially increasing that to maybe even a 5th round pick if he shows out and he's playing against 3rd stringers. He can be a valuable bat. There's a lot of bad quarterback situations out there. So I do think that we jumped the gun. We wanted that roster spot. So does that mean Anquan Bolden's coming in? I wouldn't count it out. It's said by Chris Brown that he went back to his family. He was said to want to play around Florida, which obviously leaves only 2 teams. or three, I guess, but it would leave three teams that he wanted to play for. So I do think that that roster spot opening, that trade, and the news of him going back to talk to his family to kind of interpret what he wants to do with the Bills, that's a good thing. I don't think Anquan Boldin would make any more than like $2 to $3 million this year. You could roll that money over. It absolutely can be done. You can roll over any amount. So you would have to make sure that that $2.5–3 million is going to go to next season, and that where you could really start to bank some money and start to pay some of your players like Sammy Watkins, who's coming up. Ragland started at the weak side. No, I think Ragland's your middle linebacker. Just transitioning to linebacker, I've had a lot of questions here right now on linebacker, so that must be a really hot topic for people. Look, I said on our live podcast just a couple of days ago that linebacker is actually one of my favorite positions because you have a lot of mix and match going on. I'm on record saying we don't have that top-end, high-end talent at the linebacker spot, but I do think there's a lot of mix and matching and a lot of talent there at linebacker. I think you have Reggie Ragland, who was just said today by Rex Ryan that he was his best player on defense, period, before getting injured. He had some hard times rehabbing his injuries. I heard his weight got a little out of hand, but it's said to be down into great shape now. He's ready to go. I do think he's your day one starting middle linebacker, bearing any foreseen injuries or any bad circumstances there. So, once again, I think Reggie Ragland's your starting middle linebacker. Your starting weak to me is Gerald Hodges. So. That would be that. And at your starting Sam, you're probably going to have a rotation there. And, one of the leading, obviously, is Lorenzo Alexander. Is probably going to be your starting strong side linebacker. Preston Brown could factor into all three of them, to be honest. So I don't at this point see Preston Brown starting, but if he does have a good training camp, I mean, McDermott said it a couple of times that he's going to find the best 2 to 3 guys. And Matt Milano is your big nickel, too. So don't forget in passing situations, you're going to see him come on the field to me and get some snaps there as he possesses a unique skill set, specifically hand-chosen by McDermott for this defense. So you'll see him take a lion's share of the passing snaps. Who's going to kick for us this year? I would hope Hauschka. I mean, we paid him to be a starting kicker, so he doesn't have any competition even on the roster. He has a backup punter kicker who's competing with them, so should be able to do kickoffs too, so we shouldn't need to waste time on that. My best guess, a number 2 receiver, I mean, I'm going to have to go with Zay Jones. I really do think he grabs that role. He'll play at all different receiving spots, and Zay Jones is going to be your number 2 in snaps, at least. So, he's still going to play a lot in the slot. Philly Brown's another name to watch out for. He was a rock for Cam Newton when Kelvin Benjamin went down. That wide receiving core was Philly Brown and Ted Ginn Jr. And Philly Brown, he didn't put up crazy numbers, but he was very, very, very solid for Cam Newton. Made a great play in the playoffs. I can't say enough about Philly Brown. I really think he's a top 4 receiver on this team. He'll get a lot of snaps. He generally stays healthy. I've been seeing him even being able to take punt returns. So I like a lot of what Philly Brown has to offer the roster. So he would be right now, he would be my 3rd receiver. So, and then Andre Holmes is going to factor in too, based on, I have no idea what he can bring to the table. A lot of people are really extremely positive on him. I'm not quite as positive on Andre Holmes on a receiving standpoint. He should bring enough to the roster on special teams, ability on all the different special teams units. But can he come in and be a number 2 or number 3 receiver? I don't know. I'm still can't get over that. I know he's a different player, but I still can't get over the fact that Andre Holmes was actually beat up by Seth Roberts. Look, he played real well under Derek Carr's rookie year. And just kind of fell off the map. So I'm looking for big things out of Holmes, but I also don't know that you can't really count on him to be any more than your depth, Marcus Easley, and potentially possess a little bit more receiving skills than Marcus Easley. But at this point, I don't really think you can count on him to be any more than a 4th receiver. Granted, good depth at this point. We were fiddling through receivers last year. I don't have any problems with him being on the roster. And Jeremy Butler's another one who's going to bring at least another veteran presence who's going to, he's not talked about a lot. I really think that Jeremy Butler could be your last receiver on the roster. He brings special teams as well, as we've seen that be a precedent on this coaching staff. Dawkins is a day 1 starter, absolutely. There's no doubt. We'll see tomorrow. I'm sure offensive line will be in the question, but the offensive line is the favorite group on this roster for me. If it was proof they were able to cut Patrick Lewis and Cyrus Kouandjio, I think there's a rock solid 8 or 9 guys on that offensive line. And if John Miller does go down, or if Mills goes down, I don't think you lose anything with any of the backup players. Like Ryan Groy's the best backup interior offensive lineman in the league, in my opinion. So. I think that's a huge thing to say. We've gone, you've referenced our podcast, go check that out with, Nate Geary and Eric, check that out from a couple of days ago. But like I stated, I think this is as good of an offensive line unit that we've had in many, 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 many years. These aren't your Colin Brown units. These aren't, Zebry Sanders, these guys that, they were awful. I think we've transitioned out of that to have the best running game in the league. And they're actually very sufficient at pass blocking. Like Cordy Glenn's, I don't know if Rob's still on here, but, he's one of the most underrated left tackles in the game. He doesn't get talked about enough. He gets paid a lot, but he's very good. Cordy Glenn's, rock solid. Richie Incognito's like your best pulling guard in the league. Rock solid. Eric Wood, he does what he does well. I mean, he bullies in run game, struggled a little bit in the pass game, but Ryan Groy's right there too if any mishaps happen. So John Miller's the most improved guard in the NFL. So Jordan Mills is a little weak link, but I do think he'll play better than he did the last couple of years. And he was re-signed by this offensive line coach and by McDermott to play. So. I actually don't know who Nick O'Leary's grandfather is. I've never heard anyone mention who his grandfather might be. So I'm sorry I can't help you there. But I do. The offensive line, I cannot say enough about how solid it is, and we'll see it up close and personal coming up here. I think it's something to watch. I think it's the best 8, and that's not even including Vlad Ducasse, who this offensive line loves. I mean, Juan Castillo is a big fan of Vlad Ducasse. I think is he a starting right tackle or right guard? No. Is he a really good 6th or 7th offensive lineman? I do think that. I do think that he brings depth, and he can spot start in an emergency if someone gets hurt. So you got Mills, you got Ducasse, and you have Groy as your 3 backups. And that's Chantrell, too. He's going to start the year on the suspended list. He's going to have to serve 5 games. But with Kouandjio getting cut, I pretty much think you locked in keeping Chantrell Henderson on the roster long term because, look, he possesses that talent, and we had enough faith to really cut our backup left tackle. So Cyrus had a really weird offseason. No one really knows what happened when he was jumping the fence like half naked and caught by cops. Or really, that story's bizarre. That wasn't really talked about enough. But could have been minor, but he ended up getting caught from that. So we'll see what happens there on the offensive line. But I really do think it's a solid 8. I do think there's a 9th guy there as well. I mean, there's Michael Ola. There's a couple of other players that I think one will come up, and they'll probably keep 9 offensive linemen. Defensive line rotation's a question that's been asked. That's a tricky one. Without knowing a little bit more about McDermott, and we'll find out more about the defensive line rotation coming up here soon. But you got your rock solid starters. So once again, I think that's a pretty good group of Jerry Hughes, Marcel Darius, Kyle Williams, and Shaq Lawson. So there's your day 1 starters. From there, you have Adolphus Washington. We'll see what happens with his bizarre story, too, at the water park. Like, who brings a gun to the water park? If you know why you would do that, comment. I want to know why you would bring a gun to a water park. Like, what's the rationale there? So, Adolphus Washington, you have Drell Worthy, you have Ryan Davis. I think that would be your initial 7-man rotation. That would be your active guys on game days at this point today. I do think there's room to add there. Look, you're going to need to add players. And people, Mike Rodak said a couple of days ago that the Bills are going to need to add 3 or 4 pieces, and it was tweeted by a national analyst that basically said, look at how bad their Bills roster is, they're going to need to add 3 or 4 guys. Really? Like, because you're 50 to 53 man at the back of your roster, that's going to be what interprets like how good your team is? I don't know about that. If you're not looking to upgrade, I'd love to be in your shoes. But you have Max Vales, who's an underrated pass rusher. You have DeAndre Coleman, who's a big body at the nickel or at the nose tackle position. Marquavius Lewis is supposed to be one of the best run defending defensive linemen in the draft this year. And then that's not including some of the flyer pickups. We have like Jake Matz and Eddie Yarbrough. There's a couple guys there that could make some noise for themselves, and one of them probably will sneak on the roster. I think Max Vales, to me, is the most talented guy beside those 7, the for sure 7. If Adolphus Washington's a for sure, he should be if there's no legal problems. And then, that leads me to one of a favorite signing that's happened, not Bakari Rambo, but it was Sam Barrington. Sam Barrington was the Packers' future middle inside linebacker in their 3-4. He was said to be a future of that team. Suffered a really bad injury in 2015 after a promising 2014, and never was able to rebound from that to this point. But I think Sam Barrington at inside linebacker could squeak onto the roster and show himself on special teams and eventually get into the lineup. I don't know how healthy he is. He could come in and be slow. Don't know. I haven't been in his medical room. But if he comes in and he's rehabbed and he's in good shape, he's my surprise to make the roster, and he was just signed yesterday. So I think that all 3 guys that signed yesterday could actually make the team. Those are guys that they brought in for a reason at this time of the year, and you'll see those guys that come in like right around now having a really good shot to make the team because they picked those guys because there was a need on the roster. So Bakari Rambo, bearing him taking a huge step back, is going to be on the team as a safety and special teams guy. To me, Sam Barrington has a really good shot to make the roster as a special teams guy at final linebacker position. So he's got a good shape. And then we signed the guard I don't know too much about from Cleveland, Kareem Barton. I'll look into him more, but once again, after the cutting of Patrick Lewis, he has a chance to be that 9th and final lineman, at least while Sean Trell is on the reserve suspended list. So there's a lot to do. There's a lot to talk about. I could go on forever. We've already racked in 21 minutes. Who's the favorite to win the returner job? Punt returns and kick returns? With Walter Powell having that weird PED suspension, Brandon Tate's obviously going to be your for sure punt returner at this point. Kick returner? It's really up in the air. I don't even think we know yet until we see a full rotation. I think Brandon Tate will be right there taking kick returns. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's like a wild card kick returner that we're going to have this year. So with Walt Powell being out of the mix, Philly Brown is going to factor in at punt return. But obviously you're going to have to give it to Tate. He put up good punt return numbers. He's a very average kick returner, good punt returner. So we'll see between that and his special teams ability, he'll make the roster. Will he be our kick returner? I can't say at this point, but depending on how they play Trey White, he's another one that I've been hearing could potentially take returns. So that should be something definitely to watch. That return rotation should be interesting. Let's see. We have some more questions. You know what you have in Yates. Question about Yates. You absolutely know what you have in him. You know what he's going to do. He's the last Texans quarterback to win a playoff game. So, there's that. So, I think he is what he is. I think he has a value in the roster in the quarterback room as a third quarterback, emergency quarterback. I do think he gets beat out by Peterman sooner rather than later for that second quarterback role. More questions. Let's see what we got. Don't feel like 7th round pick much better than a cut. Yeah, I agree, Taylor. Yeah, definitely. I'm in the camp of a 7th round pick isn't much better than waiting it out, seeing what you had in him a little bit more over training camp. I don't think you're risking much by playing him if he ends up tanking and being awful, which Bean is basically saying, look, I don't trust him to increase his value, so we're going to move him now, open that roster spot. We need that roster spot for tomorrow. So, okay, I see the rationale. I'm not going to complain too much, but I do wish we would have played him in some games, would have taken some valuable reps away, but to increase that to a 5th or 6th round pick, in my opinion, would have been worth it because you know what you have in TJ Yates. The only one you're hurting is Peterman, so I think this is more of an indictment on getting Peterman as many snaps as humanly possible. Otherwise, you don't make this move today. If you didn't care about how many snaps Peterman got, you wouldn't make that move today because it wouldn't matter. You made that move today because you're pushing Peterman to be your number 2 quarterback. And I did just see a national report saying that there's many beliefs that Peterman will be your second quarterback coming out of training camp. So he's accurate. He's supposed to have a good OTAs. I'm really interested to see how he does in his first week. He should be getting used to the speed of the game, but I think this trade was made because you have a second quarterback in Peterman and a veteran third quarterback in TJ Yates. I think the quarterback room could be worse. I think you have an average starting quarterback. you have a potentially decent second quarterback, and then you have a good vet third quarterback in TJ Yates. So I think that you're potentially above average at each 1, 2, and 3 on the quarterback depth chart. So that's a big step in the right direction. Your offensive line is definitely above average to good to top 5 in my opinion. Your running back is top 5 in my opinion. Your receiving core is deep, but not super over top heavy. So if Sammy Watkins is back in full strength like he's showing in his videos, that unit could be better than just a lot of reports have said, you know, we have like a weakest wide receiver group. Well, you didn't watch us last year then, but I do think that it's an average wide receiver core today that could develop into more if Zay Jones and Sammy Watkins stay healthy and are producing. I think that could easily start to be in the top third of the league in the receiving core. Weakest position group, tight end group. I think tight end's a very weak position. I don't project much from Nick O'Leary. I don't really like. I mean, Jason Kroom's probably going to make the roster as an undrafted free agent as your third tight end. Logan Thomas could develop. Keith Tobridge, Wes Saxton. I don't see much there. I think Gary Barnidge is the biggest necessity of a remaining free agent as possible. If you sign me Barnidge tomorrow, I would take that over Anquan Bolden. I think with 12 personnel and a lot of different ways to run our offense, I think tight end's super important. I think Gary Barnidge would not only back you up from a Charles Clay injury, but he gives you different looks. He can block, he can catch. I'm a big fan of going out and getting Barnidge instead of Bolden. If it's a one or the other, I'd love both. But if it's a one or the other scenario, I'll take Gary Barnidge right now today, as I think that's our weakest position group. Bakari Rambo adds a little bit more to our safety group, and that's what takes it over to tight end. But both of those are pretty weak. You have Micah Hyde there, who's going to do a lot of mix and matching and playing a lot of different combo coverages. Jordan Poyer, who is going to bring a little bit there, a little bit more than some people are projecting. We know what Bakari Rambo can do. Colt Anderson's hurt in a special teamer anyways, but I mean, man, there's 2 or 3 guys there, so I do think Marcus Gilchrist would be a really good addition at this point. And I really anticipate us using this roster spot on a veteran that can help rather than an undrafted free agent that, you know, isn't going to do anything but take training camp snaps. I do think we use that open roster spot on veteran, as we saw yesterday with the 3 signings. I think we signed another veteran rather than an undrafted free agent guy that doesn't amount to anything, that doesn't even make your practice squad. So I do think that that's an important way to spend that roster spot. You just hedged your bet by trading that Cardale Jones today. I mean, you traded him today. So I think that you needed that roster spot to go ahead and do something with the veteran guys. So to me, Gary Barnidge is I know he worked out in Jacksonville just recently, but I even if he's asking for $3 million, I'm not concerned with rolling money over. I'm not Ralph Wilson playing Moneyball. I'm not concerned with rolling money over into next year. You can always make cap space. You can always do different things to clear up different cap numbers and restructures, which we didn't even get into restructures. Gary Barnidge, to me, what could he possibly be asking for that we balked at? So I have been hearing some about this front office that we have been basically putting numbers on guys and not really budging. We've seen 5 free agents leave now. I mean, most people that follow me know that I'm probably one of the most positive Bills followers and opinion-based reporter that there is. I mean, I generally trend positive on most topics, but one that's concerning me right now is 5 guys walking. That doesn't happen anywhere. You can look it up. You don't generally have 5 guys leave the building that you bring in, from veteran guys, I should say, that you bring in, that you bring through, that you bring out to dinner. So you lost Boston. You lost Barnidge, potentially. You lost Zach Brown, who was a visit. He was on our team last year, but he does count because he was a visit that came to this coaching staff on his own weeks later. So you lost Zach Brown. You lost Jeremy Maclin, and potentially Anquan Bolden's out there as well. So there's your 5. What are they supposed to do? Overpay? I don't know. Once again, I'm not Overdorf, who's still involved here. Overdorf and Bean and Shane and Gain. I don't know. I can't say what's overpaying. Are you saying, Kevin, if you gave him $500,000 to $1 million more, you would have Gary Barnidge? Yeah, I'd overpay there. We have the cap. We have $12 million plus in cap space. Yeah, I'm overpaying. What's overpaying? What are we offering them? So there's a lot of variables there that don't help me know the scenario. When you say would I overpay, I mean, depends on who, but most of those guys through I would. Yeah. Boston's probably the only one that I'm not going to overpay for. But that's a weird one that he didn't choose his old coaching staff to play for. So that's a little weird. So we must have, I'm not really sure, but we lost him as well to LA. So I'm not really sure what we could have done to keep Boston, but he would have been one that would have immediately upgraded the team too. So those are safety. You lost Boston. Once again, you lost Zach Brown. Kind of replaced him with Gerald Hodges. We'll see how that transition works out. So I'm okay with losing Zach Brown. But Anquan Bolden or Jeremy Maclin would have been huge additions to this roster at this point. So I do want to see them do a little bit more to get Anquan Bolden. I don't know how much more is overpaying. I don't think it's about money with Bolden yet. I haven't heard that yet. Until I do, I'll leave money out of Bolden. I do think that we probably could agree to terms on that. It's whether him and his family want to play up here and play in Buffalo. So I think that's more the thing with Bolden. Which running back's gonna get the most touches other than Jonathan Williams? Big UB alum. I'm going with Jordan Johnson. Could sneak on the team as your third running back. He played on an awful UB team last year. Best player by far. Knows how to make holes for himself. He's not used to an offensive line like we have. He's used to like marginal college players, let alone good NFL players. I do think Jordan Johnson could sneak on as your third running back. Hope he stays healthy because he won't get a second chance. So if he stays healthy and pounds the rock, he's got great vision. I think he's going to be your next UB Bo Oliver or James Starks that comes through UB that could make a roster. So I'm definitely going with Jordan Johnson as the Bills' potential third running back. I don't think he has much to compete with Cedric O'Neal and Joe Bayard. I don't think there's much there. Mike Tolbert's going to be a guy that's going to carry the rock as more of a running back than people think. You can LOL that we signed 2 fullbacks this offseason, but Mike Tolbert's a special teamer running back fullback. He's a utility guy. He was signed to do, as vet minimum, to do different things. So Mike Tolbert's right there as well. So they could potentially keep 2 running backs. I think it would be silly even with Mike Tolbert, but I do think that Jordan Johnson's right now my favorite third running back. But one of those other 2 guys, Cedric O'Neal or Joe Bayard, could do more to make the roster. I think you go with the younger rookie minimum contract in Jordan Johnson and a guy that you can develop. So I really do think he's our third running back after training camp's all said and done. And Patrick DeMarco is going to split out. He wasn't paid just to be an inline blocker like we saw in the last couple of years. So I do think Patrick DeMarco, Mike Tolbert take a lot of pressure off of Shady, as well as Jonathan Williams is still there. I did like a little bit of what I saw from Jonathan Williams, and the line creates huge holes. I mean, they're gassed from LaShawn. I do think anyone that can come in, it's kind of like a receiver for Aaron Rodgers. That's kind of our version of that, is kind of a running back behind LaShawn McCoy. Look at what Gillislee did. Look at what Carlos Williams did. I mean, I do think that there's something to be said for having to respect your rushing lanes, because you're gassed from having to try to tackle LaShawn McCoy and Tyrod Taylor. So I do believe that anyone, and then you have a good fullback presence with Patrick DeMarco and Mike Tolbert. So I do think there's something to be said for Jordan Johnson and Jonathan Williams being able to get in there and find holes that normally they wouldn't have under an average running game. So once again, weakest position group, tight end. I like it a little bit less than even safety, so tight end to me, and I think that's going to affect the game more on offense to me. So there's no doubt about that. Let's see, any more questions we have for today? Doesn't look like anything. Anyone else got anything? Anyone else want to know any topics before we take off? Cover One's got a really busy week ahead. Biggest loss from this year's roster, definitely for me, is going to be Robert Woods. If we could have kept Robert Woods with Sammy, Zay Jones, Philly Brown, I think that's actually a pretty good receiving core. So to me, Robert Woods started to come on, showed out in Seattle in prime time. Loved him as a guy, loved him as a player, as a blocker. I think Robert Woods is by far our biggest loss. More than Stephon Gilmore, more than Zach Brown. I don't think there's much loss there to Gerald Hodges and a healthy Reggie Ragland. So to me, it's going to be I'm going to easily say Robert Woods. But Cover One's got a lot of big things coming up. Nate Gary's going to be there covering multiple things. I'll be there throughout training camp trying to get in and out of press conferences, and I'll bring you all the news that I can. Eric's always breaking down film. I mean, Eric's 24/7 breaking down film. So, he'll be there for us. Next live Periscope, you know what? We like to do them spontaneously because it allows us to kind of do it based off of topics that come up rather than me saying I need to be here Tuesday at 2 or Tuesday at 10 p.m. I would say it'll definitely be this week. I believe we're trying to Periscope live from training camp based on if the Bills allow us to. So we're going to be there right there in and out of press conferences. We're going to be meeting with players, bringing you our awesome coverage as always. Once again, it's a blessing to be able to work alongside Eric, who could pretty much break down any scheme or help us along the way to know more than other sources because of how much he knows about film and how much time he spends there on that stuff. So that's really helpful to the rest of us, that we can go in and read an article and then be in tune with what's going on with our schemes. So tune in. Next time we'll try to give you an update of when that'll be. But I'll be going to Rochester tomorrow. I'll be checking it out Friday. Nate Geary will be there all week for different things. We'll have different guys representing in Buffalo. So look out for our content. Look out for our big new announcement coming up next week on our new sports network. And we really look forward to you guys following things again. We've grown from nothing to having 5,000-6,000 followers on Twitter. So we really appreciate that. And as always, tweet us with any questions that you have about anything. I have to address one last topic. Yates gives us the best chance to win if TT goes down. Don't agree. I can't agree with that. I think that Nathan Peterman I still think he's valuable to play and give him that time. So I'll leave you guys with that. Really looking forward to training camp. Really looking forward to McDermott tomorrow morning and Bean tomorrow morning, or tomorrow afternoon, I should say. Tune in. We'll be bringing you great content. Watch out for Periscope. Watch out for Twitter. Watch out for our websites coming up, and we'll talk to you guys soon.